All right, sounds good. So this is Bob. He's an SRP customer in Phoenix, Arizona, and he's contacted me. And Bob has been looking into trying to calculate how much money he's going to save by going solar in SRP. And Bob and I were just talking that this can be pretty challenging for customers because there's not a lot of information on the web about it. The solar salespeople that you may talk with may or may not be honest with you about how much you'll save, and they may or may not be educated on how much money you'll save. So Bob is we've been emailing. It's the first time we chatted, but I can see that he's a smart analytical guy, and so he's been trying to figure out exactly how much money he'll save if he goes solar. And I wish more customers did this, honestly, because I've done a lot of door knocking in SRP, and especially in the Phoenix area, and I've met hundreds of people personally that went solar in SRP without doing this type of research, and they got ripped off or scammed because the solar salesperson told them they were going to save X amount of money, and they ended up saving Y amount of money, or they ended up paying more money after solar than they did before solar. So I like that Bob is doing this research and taking this look at this. Unfortunately, a lot of people just kind of rely on what the salespeople tell them, and this is a commission-based job we have as a solar salesperson, and so as a informed customer, you should be skeptical about what they're telling you, because they can make a lot of money in commission on your one deal. So and just for transparency's sake, a solar salesperson can make $0 to $20,000 commission on a small residential home, depending on how much commission they add on top of it. And that sounds insane, but it's very common for solar salespeople in Phoenix and SRP to make that amount of money on a small home in SRP.
Wow.
So yeah, Bob had asked me some questions and via email, and we had been chatting via email. And if you just want to let me know kind of what you've been doing, Bob, and what your questions are, that would be great.
Well, we've been on the basic plan. I've got 16 months of data on that. And it looks like we're probably, for the overlapping data we have, we're probably similar. So I would like to know what our charges would have been had we been on one of the solar plans. And I'd really like to be able to compare between the various solar plans. It will help me be comfortable with the size of system that we get, and it will also help us to see what's feasible in terms of changing our usage patterns. We have a little flexibility there, but not a lot. Most of our, I've already looked at the demand intervals for the E27 plan between 2 and was it 8 p.m. or something, and it looks like almost half of our use is in that time period. So I'd like to see those kinds of things so I can see what kind of impact changes in use habits might have. Another factor is we have a swimming pool, and I'm interested in the EV plan as well. I haven't done any calculations with that one yet, but the idea of being able to basically maintain temperatures using the ultra low rates that they use for solar charging, for car charging in the middle of the night, should work just fine on a swimming pool, and it's a great source of energy storage. So I'd also like to look into that plan. I haven't gotten to that yet because I've been so confused by the demand charges and just exactly what figures from my hourly use to calculate and get the bill that SRP has billed me. I've managed to do that now pretty close with the basic plan, but then it gets really complicated with time of use and demand charges. But I'd like to see that for myself so I can manipulate it and see what works best for me.
Sounds good. And I know you have some experience using Excel, right?
Yes, some.
Yeah, I love Excel, such a powerful tool. I'm
Mhm.
definitely not a guru with it. I wish I was, but it can do a lot of things. So, yeah, I wrote down some notes as you were talking here. And I know you've met with some other salespeople, right? And you've gotten some quotes already. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah. They take the chart and then they estimate a monthly charge and go from there with their assumptions about what rates are going to do in the future and those kinds of things. So, I mean, we're definitely interested. I just want to understand the process so I can make right choices for us.
Sounds good. And how did you first get interested in solar? Did someone knock on your door, or did you just start looking into it voluntarily?
Um, well, we've only been in our house for, I don't know, 16 months or something. We live in Phoenix. It seems like a no-brainer that you ought to be able to use solar.
There's a lot of
But
sun here.
every time I've looked into SRP and uh, see these charges for this and the charges for that, I go like, well, I'm not really sure. And there aren't very many people around us that have solar installations either. So the question is, why not? Um,
Yeah, there's a lot less solar in SRP territory than there is in APS. And this is because going solar in SRP is more complicated than it is with APS. With APS, it's a bit more straightforward,
mhm.
and you can still save money with solar and SRP, but it requires doing something like this and working with a salesperson that has experience doing an SRP.
Mhm.
A lot of salespeople, what they do is they sell an APS and they go to SRP and they try to sell the same way, but they don't have the education and knowledge about how SRP works with solar, and so that creates problems for the customers. Um, so have you sat down with three solar salespeople in your home and gotten three different presentations at this point?
Yes.
And when you had those presentations, uh, were there things that were lacking or information you weren't provided, or what was it that stopped you from moving forward with one of those salespeople? And has you still looking into doing research at this point?
Um, yeah, I'm an analytical guy. It's just kind of not understanding if it, so I've considered time on my side. I don't have to jump into this. I'd much rather do the research, build my own confidence levels in what they're saying, and none of them were able to address the questions that I asked you originally. How do I calculate these things? How can I make reasonable choices without knowing exactly how the charges are going to be billed?
Yeah, and obviously as a consumer or a customer, if you don't operate with urgency and you have a lot of time to make your decision, that's going to put you in a better position as far as negotiation and making the right decision for yourself.
Right.
A lot of times, what the solar salespeople do is they get in your home and they try to put a lot of pressure on you to sign right there and then. And so, a lot of people do that. But Bob is, as he said, he's an analytical guy, he's a smart guy. So he's thinking to himself, well, some of this doesn't add up. I want some more information here.
Right.
And the reality is that if we're talking about, I've worked for several companies now. I've been the sales manager for three companies and trained and hired and worked with a lot of solar salespeople at this point. And the reality is that the amount of solar salespeople that actually know what I'm about to cover with Bob is very, very small. It's like 1% of them. It's alarming how little solar salespeople know about how the utility works with solar in Phoenix and the SRP territory and in APS, but especially SRP because it's more complex with SRP. And I can say this is true across the country as well. So since there is no licensure or regulation in residential solar, there's a wide range of ability and competency for the people selling it, a very wide range, and most of them at the bottom of the range. And so Yeah, that kind of sounds like what you've experienced. So, let's see. So you said you had some flexibility in changing your behavior and use, and that by that you're meaning you can adjust the use of some of your large appliances outside of on-peak times. Is that what you mean?
Well, especially the pool. Um, I would like to know, I need to know the convenience versus cost trade-off. Um, yeah, we could shift some of our usage. We could probably not run the dishwasher or the dryer during peak hours, but much more than that, I'm not sure that we wouldn't just find it too inconvenient to be desirable. But
And you've
anything I can learn, and I learn by manipulating numbers. Anything I can learn about possible options, that's what I want to dig out.
Yeah, in the same way, I like to get everything in a spreadsheet and tool around with it and see all the possibilities. I'm like you. I'm an analyst. I can tell we have similar personality types. I don't know if you're into those personality tests, but I am. And or if you look at the Myers-Briggs personality types, there's 4 types. I can
Yeah.
tell we're both analysts, and what analysts like to do is exactly what you're talking about. We like to look at every possibility so we can fully understand it before we make our decision. So I'm the same way. And so, okay, so we talked about a common issue here in Phoenix. There's 300 days of sunshine per year. We're in the summertime. It's usually over 100 degrees during the day. It can get up to 120 around there. And so the swimming pool can be an expense as far as keeping it, whatever the swimming pool does. I'm not an expert, but there's a pool pump involved, and that filters the water through the pool, and that has to run quite a bit to make sure that the pool stays clear and doesn't get green. And so, when you fly over Phoenix, you see a lot of green pools where this wasn't occurring, right? The pool will get green fast if you don't
Yeah.
if you don't maintain it properly and have a pool person to handle it yourself. So I assume that you have a more modern pool pump, is what we call a variable speed pool pump. Is that what you have for your pool?
Yeah. Our house is
Okay.
only a year and a half, and we put the pool in when we built the house.
And
So it's
you're
all pretty
and you're
modern.
thinking, and there's this electric vehicle plan that SRP has. I'm going to share my screen here. Let's take a look at this plan. So if you go to the SRP website,
Yep.
and you go to their SRP solar price plans, there's basically 4 of them after you go solar, right? They divide them up between demand plans and export plans. And so
Yes.
generally speaking, the difference between these plans is that the demand plans have what's called a demand charge, and they don't credit you for exporting power to SRP's grid when you have solar. The export plans credit you for exporting power to SRP's grid when you have solar, and they don't have demand charges, but they have higher usage charges. And so I'm going to try to keep this simple, but when you're looking at these 4 different plans, all the components of them can get a little complicated. So he's talking about the electric vehicle export plan, and all this information is on SRP's website, everyone. So you can get all this information by going to their website. And so this plan is really designed for people that have electric vehicles that want to charge them and plug them in at night. And so what they do is all these plans have on-peak and off-peak periods, all 4 of them. And so this particular plan has a super off-peak time that is added to it. And that is between, let's see, are they going to tell us here? It's between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. daily.
Okay.
And you can see by looking at this that this plan charges a lower usage rate during 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. than the rest of the times. So it's around 6 cents for the 3 segments of the year: winter, summer, and summer peak. And so that is, Bob is thinking about running his pool during this time, and that's a legitimate reason. So that's an aspect of this plan. Now do you want me to go over all the plans with you, Bob?
I think I understand all the, the components. What I don't understand is how to use the data that I've downloaded from SRP to calculate the bills that I would have gotten with those plans.
Okay,
We
sounds
could
good.
just do that with one, and I could probably figure it out for all the others.
Okay. So you did ask me, I just want to make sure we fully understand all the components. You did ask me in your email, how is the demand charge calculated?
Yes.
And so the demand charge, of course, if you go back here, is for these two plans, customer generation average demand plan. So demand charges for most SRP solar companies, they're going to be on the customer generation plan, which is the E27 plan. And the demand charge is what makes or breaks their purchase of solar.
Right.
For the vast majority of customers that I help in SRP, what we do is we give them a demand manager as part of the solar system, and then we put them on the E27 customer generation plan. This is for most regular sized to small size homes. This is the most reliable way to save them money with solar. And for some larger homes, we would put them on the E13 plan. And by larger homes, I mean larger amounts of kilowatt hours used per year, right? Those are typically the two plans we work with in SRP when we're helping customers go solar. So we're looking at the customer generation and the average demand plan. And so this demand is very, very tricky. And it's hard to understand. And SRP may or may not be invested in making it hard to understand.
They haven't answered my requests.
Yeah, like Bob's tried to call them up and to get more, and they're not gonna help you out with it. SRP doesn't stand to benefit much when you go solar, so they don't have people ready to help you to answer these types of questions. So, and like I said, it makes or breaks the purchase. The demand charge is going to usually, it's going to dictate whether you save money with solar, how much you save, or whether you pay more with solar afterwards. And so let's dive into this. If you click on these plans, there's PDFs that have a little bit more information about these plans, and I'm going to pull these PDFs here. I got these from the SRP website. So let's dive into demand charge, one of my favorite topics. And so here are the demand charges for the E27 customer generation plan. And so these demand charges are nasty. Here are the SRP customer generation E27 demand charges, right? The way the demand charges work here are, like I said, it's complex. So we have 3 segments of the year: summer, summer peak, and winter. I've put the months that this applies here. Okay. And so Bob, you already understand what demand is, right?
Yeah.
And for those of people watching that don't, demand is basically simultaneous energy usage in your home. So your usage charges are based on kilowatt hours, which is use of energy over time. Demand is use of energy simultaneously. So, for example, your large electricity appliances, like your air conditioner is the big one in Phoenix, Arizona. Your electric water heater, your electric stove, your electric dishwasher, your microwave, your electric dryer. Those are the biggest ones. The electric dryer, the electric water heater, and the AC are the biggest culprits. They use the most demand. So basically your demand is how much energy you're simultaneously using in the home at any given time. So say an air conditioner usually uses around 4 kilowatts of demand, right? And then your dryer can use around 4 kilowatts as well. And so now you're at an 8 kilowatt demand if you're running those at the same time, right? And so you start to stack more and more, your demand gets higher and higher. So let's see how we calculate this. So they do this in a nasty way. The more you use demand, the more expensive it gets. It's not just it's not a base price like the average demand. So say we're using 4 kilowatts of demand in the summertime, right? So the first 3 kilowatts is charged at $7.89. So we do 7.89 times 3, right? That's $23.67, right? And so we have 1 more kilowatt, but it's charged in the next tier, right? So we do 1 times 14.37 because that's the next tier, right?
Yeah.
And then plus 23.67. That's a demand charge of $38.04 for the month, right? Now, when we have, do you understand that?
Well, not entirely. That demand is between the hours of 2 and 8, is it not? Isn't that what's
Correct.
considered
Correct.
peak? So I have downloaded hourly data for every day for a year, the 8,000 row spreadsheet, but just trying to get one month.
I need to explain how it works first before I jump into the calculation. So let's do. Okay, so on the customer generation E27 plan with SRP, this is how the demand charge works. It's really, really nasty. Okay, so you have what it looks at is it looks at the Monday through Friday outside of holidays. There, it's 2 to 8 p.m., which is on peak. They look at each 30-minute interval during each day. So it's 6 hours, that's 12 30-minute intervals, right? And so there's 22 non-weekend, non-holiday days, or non-weekend days in the month usually, right? So you do 22 days times 12 30-minute intervals, and you get 264 30-minute intervals. So on the E27 customer generation plan, what SRP does is they look at all 264 30-minute intervals. They're going to take the very highest one out of all of them. You can have 263 good days where you use 4 kilowatts demand, but on the one where you use 12, that's what they're going to look at, and that's how they charge you for the whole month.
Okay. So I've got the hourly, and so I've got the total kilowatts for the hours between 2 and 8, but that's an hour, and they're looking at 30-minute segments. Do I assume that I'm adding up half of what occurred during an hour? And
okay, so yeah, the way that works is if the kilowatt hour is based on how many kilowatts used over the hour period, right? And of course that fluctuates throughout the hour. The demand goes up and down throughout the hour, right? And so the kilowatt hour is basically an average of that use over the hour, and that's how they charge you, right? Because the demand is always fluctuating in a home. As everything gets turned on and off, it's always fluctuating. So knowing the kilowatt hours doesn't tell us what the peak demand was, because it's going to look at the very peak demand during that 30-minute interval. So, for a minute during that 30-minute, it spikes up to 12 kilowatts. That's what they're going to charge you based on.
Well, that's virtually impossible to determine then.
Bob, this is what I typically do to help customers out with this. I mean, since we're usually just putting customers on the E27 plan with the demand manager, we don't go through this process because we know we're going to be limiting demand manually with the demand manager anyway. But what I've used before to take a look at this is there's an online calculator that will give you roughly how much your demand could be. United Power Demand Calculator. It's unitedpower.com/demand-calculator. And so basically, this can give you a rough estimation of how much demand you'll have in your home during on peak if you toggle on these appliances, right? And so, yeah, your air conditioner, like I said, is around 4 kilowatts.
Okay.
Your electric range, 1.5 kilowatts, television, 0.4, refrigerator, 0.8, right? So this is something that would be pretty typical during any 30-minute interval in the summertime, right?
Yeah.
And this isn't even considering any other appliances, right?
Yeah.
And so, lights generally do not use a lot of energy, so they're not part of this calculation, especially if they're LED lights.
Mm-hmm.
So, but so if we calculate this demand charge, let me know does the calculator pop up? Probably not.
I'm not seeing a calculator.
Okay. But yeah, I mean, this is 6.7 of demand. And so you can calculate that demand based upon the sheet that we were talking about before, the E27 sheet. So if we calculate this amount of demand, the first 3 kilowatts, so you do 3 times 7.89, which is the demand price, that's $23.67. And then the remaining 3.7 kilowatts is charged at 14.37. So that's 5316 plus 2367. 5316 plus 2367. That's a $76.83 demand charge, which if you don't have a demand manager, that's like best case scenario for the month in the summer. But you're likely going to go much higher than that. And this is exactly why customers end up paying more money after solar than they did before. It's because they're in SRP, they got solar, and they don't have a demand manager manually limiting their demand. And so, and they're on one of these demand manager plans, or sorry, these demand charge plans, right? Either customer generation or the average demand. So what happens is they like any American, they during on peak 2 to 8 p.m. Monday through Friday, they get home from work or whatever. This is when you're going to use the most amount of electricity in the home with you and your family. And so boom, you start turning on the washing machine, you start turning on the clothes dryer, you microwave something for dinner. Maybe someone is vacuuming, right? Someone takes a shower, so it runs the electric water heater, so on and so forth. So this could typically happen, especially with a family that has children. We've got pretty much all the large appliances in the house running with the television. People are cooking dinner. This is a really common scenario in an American home, right? Especially with the family.
Can I ask one question here?
Sure.
You said there are 264 intervals per billing period, I assume. Is that right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the demand charge is one charge based on the one interval that usage is highest. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep. So
you don't have to do it by day. You don't have to track it by. Okay, that helps because I didn't know what I was supposed to be tracking.
It's just the one, which is when you're on this plan in SRP with solar, you need a demand manager, which is basically the answer, because it's not humanly possible to manage your demand and keep it below a certain level. It's not, a computer has to do that. A human is not able to do that, no matter how much they think they can. I meet with customers that are like, I don't need a demand manager because I don't run anything except the air conditioning in the summer. Like for 6 hours, Monday through Friday, that's not realistic. And so anyway, with all these things running, the demand has spiked to 17.6 kilowatt. You basically got, this is during summer. And remember, summer peak in July and August is even higher charges. So you basically got 7.89 for the first three. Let me zoom in on this. You got 7.89 for the first 3 kilowatts, 14.37 for the next, and 27.28 for anything over 10 kilowatts, right? So we're looking at the amount of demand we're looking at here is very high. It's 17.6, right? So we got the first 3 here, we got the next 7 here, and then we got the next 7.6 here. So this is how it works. So you multiply this times this, and then you multiply this times this for the next 7, and you multiply the remaining 7.6 times this, right? And then you want to sum it all up here. Yeah, that gives us a $331 demand charge. So in that instance, someone's definitely going to be paying more for solar than they did after, because they have a solar loan that's probably $100 to $200 a month. And so, you know, what was maybe $300 or $400 bills in the summer with SRP only has turned into $400 or $500 bills with solar. So that's how a lot of people get ripped off with solar in Phoenix and SRP. It's because they're put on this customer generation plan and they don't have a demand manager, right? And so I can talk about what the demand manager basically does. And I set a lot of customers up with it. And because typically when a customer goes solar in SRP, and they're going to save the most amount of money by going onto the customer generation E27 plan with a demand manager. That's going to save them the most amount of money. And since everyone who goes solar is doing it to save money, and that is pretty much the sole reason why they do it, my goal is to save them as much money as possible. So let's chat about how that demand manager works. We can go back to this this website here. that, go back to that demand calculator website. If I can find it in all my windows. There it is. Okay, so this is what the demand manager is going to do, right? We're going to turn everything off except the air conditioner, right? And so the air conditioner, as we said, uses 4 kilowatts. So you're going to set your demand manager at 4 or 5 kilowatts, and that's going to be the limit that allows the house to use. Your large appliances are going to be hooked up to this demand manager device. And so the way it works is that it cycles these large appliances on and off as you go to use them. It doesn't stop you from using the large appliance. It stops you from using them simultaneously. SRP offers a $250 rebate credit when you get a demand manager with solar. So they're promoting this use of this because that's how people save money generally in SRP, is with this demand manager. So it's 2 to 8 p.m. Monday through Friday in the summer. You are running your air conditioner, of course, or else you're probably dead in Phoenix. So in Phoenix, if the air conditioner's been running, it can cycle off for a while and it's going to be okay. If it's off for a long time in the afternoon, it might get uncomfortable. But if it's off for a little bit, it's not going to be a huge deal, right? Especially if you have your house cooler to begin with, right? So what will occur if you go to use, say, your electric range is you turn on the electric range, the demand manager is going to cycle off the air conditioner, because 4 plus 1.5 kilowatts takes it over the demand limit of 5. So it's going to cycle off that air conditioner. That's how it keeps your demand low, by manually doing it like that. So you're using the stove, the electric range, and when you're done with it, you turn it off, the air conditioner cycles back on, right? So that's how it works, and it's going to work like that for all the large appliances. You go to turn on the other big culprit, if I can find it, the electric dryer, the clothes dryer. Turn that on, it's going to cycle the air conditioner off while you use the clothes dryer. So you probably don't want to be drying clothes from 2 p.m. to 8 p.m. because during that drying cycle of an hour or however long it lasts, you're not going to have air conditioner, and it might get uncomfortable depending on your tolerance level. When I was growing up, my dad kept it at 80 degrees at all times, so I have a pretty high tolerance level for heat. Some people in Phoenix want it at 70 degrees or lower at all times, right? And they're going to pay a lot more money for electricity if that's what they do. So clothes dryer goes off, the air conditioner comes back on, right? So it's not a big inconvenience for people, especially if they're money conscious and they want to save the most amount of money with solar as possible. The only time it becomes a problem is when solar companies stick people with demand managers and they give them no education. And that happens all the time. Solar salespeople and companies, they go, hey, you're going to go solar, you're going to save money. Great. That's it. That's all there is to it. It's really simple. And then they install a demand manager, an SRP, and a solar system. And then all of a sudden, the customer can't use their large appliances during on-peak like they want to simultaneously. It's not a problem unless they weren't educated about it first. They weren't told about it, right? If customers were told about it, it's not that big of a deal. Like if you're already money conscious, you were trying not to use a lot of large appliances during on-peak anyway. Before, typically, if people were on time of use plan, but it's not really a big inconvenience for people. And so that's how it works. You'll hear some companies say, well, we don't do demand managers and SRP because customers complain about them afterwards. Well, in my experience, customers only complain about them if they weren't told about them from the beginning, right? If customers know during the buying process, hey, this is how you're going to save the most amount of money in SRP with this device called a demand manager, they already made that decision to accept the demand manager and having their demand managed during on-peak time. So it's not going to be an issue later. Like I said, it's only an issue if they were given no education or knowledge about the demand manager and they got the demand manager without being told, if that makes sense. Do you have any questions on that?
No, just that.
We can move on to the average demand now.
Okay.
And so the average demand is a little bit more forgiving in the way that it works. What it does, and here's the average demand website, what it does, instead of looking at the very highest 30-minute interval, it's going to take the average of the intervals throughout the month, right? And so we gain, however, how many intervals we had during the month, there were a lot of them, 264, I believe. The average demand is going to take the average of the demand throughout all the intervals, and that's going to be your demand charge. Now, this can be good for people that don't have a demand manager, because you're not going to get penalized for one spike in the month. The reason why I don't set up customers on this plan is because you'll save more money with the customer generation plan or demand manager. Since the customer generation with the demand manager is going to keep it low, you get charged on whatever you have your demand setting at. If you go with the average demand without a demand manager, it's always going to be more than if you had a demand manager, if that makes sense, right? You're not going to get charged that peak of 17 kilowatts, but maybe you'll get charged 10 kilowatts, which still is very expensive in the summer. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah, so that's how demand charges work. As far as, did you have any other questions about the components? One thing that solar salespeople usually never know, because I've heard so many solar salespeople tell customers, on all 4 of these plans, you get credited for exporting energy to the grid when you have solar. That's not true. And it is very common for that. That's what happens in APS. Like I said, with these salespeople go from APS, they try to sell. They use the same sales pitch in SRP as they use in APS, but it's a different utility. It works differently. And so let's take a look at. I can find these. All right, so we got our 4 plans, right? What solar salespeople always tell customers, this is like without fail, 100% of them, besides me, they say this. They say, when you get on that customer generation E27 plan, SRP is going to credit you for the power you send to the grid. Everyone says that. It's not actually true. There's no credit given to you on the demand plans. There's only credit given to you on the export plans, which don't have a demand charge, right? And so this is just part of how they sell customers. If you see all the fake BS ads on Facebook, they always say things like, utility pays you for sending power to the grid, or free solar is the common one, right? And so, no, if you're on the customer generation E27 plan with the demand manager, which you probably should be, if you're going solar and SRP, they don't pay you anything for exporting power to the grid, but you can still save money. I'll even show you a bill right now of, I think the bill's in Spanish. I didn't have time to look up another one, but I can show you. I mean, I can interpret the Spanish for you.
Sure.
Okay, so he's on the customer generation plan, E27, right? These are the parts of the bill. So this is the grid fee right here. Cargo de servicio mensual, that's the grid fee. It's the service charge, right? $32.44 on the customer generation plan. This is the demand charge. This particular customer does not have a demand manager. That's why I pulled this up. This wasn't my customer, by the way. I was working for another company, and we would save all of our post-solar bills. And this was another salesperson at the same company I worked at, right? And I pulled all these bills out so I could show customers these examples. This is when the solar salesperson didn't give the customer a demand manager in SRP. And so you can see here are his on-peak and off-peak charges for drawing power from SRP. Here's the Mesa tax. Here's the state tax. There is no export credit here, right? Because it doesn't exist on the E27 customer generation plan. Now let's look at another bill where it does exist. He's on the customer generation time of use export plan. This is the E13 plan. You can see here, now this one's in English. It's basically the same summary of charges. You got your service charge of $32.44. You have your on-peak and off-peak energy charge. It's quite a bit, right? Quite a bit. And depending on the customer's usage, and how much, this was one of my customers. He did not want a demand manager as part of his system, even though I advised him to do so. And I had him, when customers do this, I have them sign a waiver that basically says, I'm not going to save money with solar because I'm not electing to get this demand manager right. But this is what he wanted to do. And so also I've analyzed his usage. His usage after solar went way up. I'm not sure exactly why, but I believe he was using around 25,000 kilowatt hours a year, which is high. Then after solar went up to 35,000. So that's why you're seeing these very high on peak and off peak usage charges, because the system I calculated for him was based upon the last 12 months of usage. And then he decided to add another 50% or more of usage on top of that. So that's going to result in you buying a lot of power from SRP after solar, because the system that you bought, your solar salesperson calculated based on your previous usage. Now, I'm not sure exactly why he's used so much more. Usually it's because more people have moved into the home. There's been an addition to the home. They got a pool or an electric car, but it's not advisable to do that, right? And so, but I'm using this as an extreme example. He's on the economy price plan discount, negative $23. Now you can apply for this with SRP. They take a look. It's actually on the honor system. They may or may not ask you for your paychecks, but anyone can apply for this economy price plan discount. And I have a blog post and video about that on my website. And you got your city and state tax. You'll notice there's no demand charge in here because there is no demand charge in the customer generation time of use export plan. And then there's an export credit. So in SRP, the export is not high. It's 2.8 cents. In APS, it drops every year. This last year, it was around 9 cents. And then it's dropping tomorrow or September 1st. It drops in APS every year on September 1st. So, but it's more around 9 cents. So that's one reason why APS works a bit differently. So you can see this, and with, since he doesn't have a demand manager, he's not on a demand plan. He's on a plan that does not have a demand charge, right? He also uses a ton of energy in the home, more than the solar system was built for. And so this is why we have him on this particular plan. He's actually still saving money with solar now. He's still saving money compared to what he was paying with SRP only before. If he elected to get a demand manager and he limited his usage in his home to what he was previously using, he would save a ton of money. He would save hundreds or thousands a year, but he doesn't choose to do that. He wants to use what he wants to use. He doesn't want to limit his demand, but he wanted solar as well. So in this instance, we can still save you money. If you're this type of customer, you just can't save as much money in SRP.
Call us at 602-753-0560 for a free consultation today.